Call to order the Finance Committee meeting for November 24, 2021. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Swanson? Mr. Hess?
Present.
Ms. Polk?
Present.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton?
Present.
Ms. Parker?
Present.
Mr. Fairfield?
Present.
Mr. Featherling?
Present.
Mr. Dunnell?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Long?
Present.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler? Mr. Seroy? We have a quorum.
I have no request for public comment. Are there any requests for public comment? Seeing no request for public comment, we'll move on. Approval of the minutes. We have minutes for September 29, October 12, and October 21. Is there a motion to combine and approve? Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We move to the Finance Department. Mr. McCarty, your packets, on your tablets, you have the miscellaneous financial reports, starting with the sales tax.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Number 3.
Starting with the regular monthly deposits, sales tax continues to impress. Obviously, we're watching that trend, but it's a very positive trend at this point, especially as compared to a year ago. Income tax continues on a very positive trend as well. My gut says there's a change between use tax and sales tax at the state, but I have not found it yet to be able to report to you, because this is the first year we've seen in a long time that use tax has actually gone down. So I have a feeling it has to do with online sales, but I've been trying to find an explanation for those two, other than good economic impact locally. So PPRT, we have one more for this year, is strong. So I don't know if there's any questions. That's just a quick highlight. With looking at the Village of Bradley, Bourbonnais, City of Kankakee, their year has been strong as well. So I believe it has a lot to do with local economy as well. So if there's any questions, I just go through those.
Are there any questions on that?
More time than necessary on those.
Hearing none, we could go to cash flow update.
Yeah, cash flow, I don't have a lot to identify. We'll be opening up fiscal year 22 next month, and running estimates for that already as we look at stuff and potential changes. But right now, all's good on the cash flow front. So unless there's any questions.
No questions on cash flow. We move to claims recommended, not recommended for approval. You have one.
We have two.
I'm sorry, two from the auditors.
The first one is, I believe, will be recurring, which means it's probably going to be recurring for unrecommended, not recommended. So I don't know if the committee wants to entertain not only approval of this one, but any future ones. They are reviewed by the administration before they come down. But I'll just put that out there because there's probably going to be more of these.
Mm-hmm.
This is a claim dealing with professional services. Is there a motion to approve this and any future ones in terms of this this set of professional services?
Parker. Polk.
Parker and Polk. We'll need would it be appropriate to combine the other non-approved one, or if we're doing the one for a long term, maybe we ought to do them separate? I think that would be my position.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to state for the record, this is the auditor objecting to the legal fees, us paying the legal fees for the lawsuit he brought against us. Make some sense of that.
Okay.
I just want to
Thank
make
you.
sure the record is clear on that. This whopping
Absolutely.
$97, but it will get very expensive because he's unwilling to have discussions. So, thank you.
All right. Any other comments on the motion in terms of the professional services? If not, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Donnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler,
Aye.
motion carries.
All right, then the other item is mileage to a training session.
This is a 911 employee. It appears that the original discussion, this went from the auditor's office back to 911, and came back. It appeared that the total mileage was in question, and then that appeared to have been cleared up. And now the question is the mileage rate. It appears that this was calculated using last year's rate, not the current rate. But we did ask Tammy Peterson what she wanted to do, and she said pay it. So we have to bring it here. So it's recommended from the auditor's office at $60.87, and the claim came through at $62.50. So that's the situation.
It would take a lot of
with this
extra
one.
paperwork to.
A lot of time for, yeah, a couple bucks.
$2 and, or less than $2.
So
Motion to pay it. Second by Mr. Fairfield. Question, Ms. Weber, just a moment.
My question, thank you, is just what's the difference in mileage rate? 56 to,
yeah, that's
57, I think. The old form has 57.575.
0.575.
and you think it went down to 56?
It did.
Okay, so I was wondering why it was 62 and he's recommending 60. Is it because the rate went down?
The rate went down.
Okay.
Any other questions? Motion to approve is on the table. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Donnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler, motion carries.
All right, we move to monthly claims. Is there a motion to approve the monthly claims?
Polk.
Mr. Fairfield, Polk seconds. Any discussion on the monthly claims? Hearing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Donnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler,
Aye.
motion carries.
Point of clarification. I just want to make sure that the mileage rate, we paid at the correct rate, 56 cents. We're not saying pay at the 57 or 57 cent, correct?
By paying this, you're saying to pay it at a higher rate.
Yeah, we are paying the higher rate.
The recommendation was,
I thought we were voting to pay the 56 cents as it should be correct. The forms just weren't changed. I apologize for the confusion. When your no vote made me think, are we all clear on what we're voting on?
I understood it that we were paying the higher rate than what we're saying.
yeah, Tammy wanted this to come as is, which is with the higher rate.
Well, then I would make a motion to reconsider to pay it at 56 cents.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Hunter seconds that motion. Discussion?
Yeah, can we make all of the necessary corrections so that there's no question
Can't hear.
Everybody needs to use their mic. Can you turn on his?
I'm sorry. Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that all the documentation we have is reflective of what we're voting on.
I would just point out on the claim form where the auditor's notes are, it says 6087 would be the rate, or would be the payment at 56 cents.
Correct.
That's what I thought we were voting on. My apologies. I just wanted to clarify. I thought we want to pay the correct rate. We do appreciate, I'm sorry that it took, that it could have been resolved before it got here and we had to waste all this time on this. People can't communicate over the phone or whatever, but that is the correct rate, 56. So 6087 is what it should be.
Any other discussion on the motion to reconsider? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. That motion carries. A new motion could be on the floor. Mr. Wheeler, would you want to?
It's 6087, the corrected rate.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Featherling. Any discussion? A roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dennell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter,
Aye.
Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
No. All right, we move to amend resolution ending in 291. Mr. McCarty, you want to speak to necessary amendment?
Yeah, this amendment was to purchase 11 Chevy Tahoes for the Sheriff's Department. It was a resolution from August 10th. The original dollar amount was $411,000. Requesting to amend it to $415,189.50.
A motion to approve by Mr. Hess. Is there a second?
Polk.
Mr. Fairfield? Discussion. Ms. Weber?
The price went up?
There was a few small changes that ended up in the sheriff's here.
The sheriff?
No, the price did not go up, but the but the delivery did.
Ah.
So it was a matter of us going to get them, which is a 5-hour trip, which would have taken 12, probably 13 people, 2 cars, and then everybody to drive the cars back. And the dealership charged us $275 per car to drive it here themselves. So they drove it here instead of us going there. It would have cost us significantly more money to go get them ourselves.
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? We would need a roll call vote on that, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dennell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Okay, we move to the tax year 2021 levy request.
Yeah, I worked closely with Eric Blair on this and appreciate his time and information. The estimated EAV growth this year is estimated to be approximately 4.75% for the county's our portion. So that's higher than it has been, and probably going back to 05, 06 in my memory, if my memory serves me right. So calculating with the information and the tax cap, doing the estimated tax cap calculations, our estimated certified rate will be lower in 21 than it was for the 2020 tax year. And as you can see, per fund, we are able to approximately request about half of the tax cap limits us to about half of what the EAV growth is this year with all the calculations that go into that. You will notice the corporate is higher. We talked about that in the liability insurance or tort fund interaction during the budget time that we were doing that. So that's reflective of what we discussed earlier. So, we've also, over the years, last number of years, made a concerted effort to up the VAC levy, which we're doing again. So overall, the official levy request is $24,233,000. It represents approximately 2.3% increase over last year's.
Let's get a motion to approve and then have discussion. Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton seconds. Discussion. Is there any discussion? Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would it be fair to say that most of the growth of that 2.3% is due to the EAV growth? Is that a fair assessment or connected to the EAV growth?
Yes, it's directly connected to the EAV growth. As
Property values go up, people's homes are worth more,
Yep.
and obviously the EAV impacts the percent increase. So, and because of tax caps, we can't take all of that, nor would I think we would as a county, but I just want to get that out there. There was a statement made by a reporter some years ago that every man, woman, and child is now going to pay more in taxes this year than in the past. And they leave out businesses and all of the other big property and new construction and all of that stuff. So a perspective would be in order, I think, for this community to realize that it's not every man, woman, and child. There's new construction in there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, we're able to take a CPI index that's given to us by the state, and then also new construction. So it goes into the formula and how all this comes out. So we've been within a couple tenths, hundredths of a percent, I should say, working with Eric and the information that we do in this estimate. So it usually comes out pretty darn close. So.
I believe it's also accurate that, of course, at least for residential, there's the 3-year averaging that goes into the tax assessment on property. So any changes are part of a gradual shift that takes place. Any other questions, comments? We need a roll call vote on this also.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I will add, I brought this calculation. Sometimes I get asked this question for a $150,000 home. As we were talking about with the valuation, the 3-year average, the change, that percentage change equals $12.76 for the county portion. So just to put it in perspective in that regard.
All right, we move to Imrf rates.
All right, Imrf Rates. Yeah, I gave you a copy of the email, Anita, that Chairman Wheeler and I know. Once I got the final rates there with her and Joanne, and as you can see, we're getting a substantial decrease in the IMRF employer matching rate. 17% rate decrease for the regular, 16% decrease for SLEP, and then a dollar amount decrease for the eco plan. She also worked on an estimate. I went through and did it as well. We worked on it together, and together we believe it'll be in the neighborhood, those percentage decrease of about $700,000 of actual savings with those percentage changes in our plans. So just an FYI.
Any questions, comments? Ms. Weber?
Just a why, thank you. Why?
I believe it's there with the overall investments that they've had, you know, they always reassess that with in the investment pool and stuff, and then we get the benefit of that as
Oh,
well.
it's a positive economy.
Positive, yeah, positive investment time. Yeah, I believe I saw they went up, wish I would have locked that in, but somewhere around 10 billion in their overall investments, you know, last year, if I'm right, my memory serves me right on that.
Mr. Wheeler.
Just a quick question along those lines. The, last year they adjusted the rate they said to compensate for a drag in the market. And we all, when I say we, a lot of the chairman in a lot of counties it was performing at a high rate anyway. They were expecting a dip and it didn't happen. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with it as well. They overshot the percentage in the past, and now they're kind of correcting now in the other direction. I think that's a possibility as well. So
Useful information. All right, we move to the Arbor funding requests. I see first you have fund summaries for the committee.
At the last pages of the packet, I believe just an update where the current funding is for both the Arpa Fund and then the Lost Revenue Fund. For consideration for approval today, we have approximately just over $55,000 to review today. So, just the running update on the Arpa funds.
Mr. Wheeler.
I have to clarify because this doesn't include the second tranche of money.
Correct.
This is in the bank right now. There's another half that is supposed to be coming. The reason we haven't included it is because they haven't released the formula specifically on how they're going to calculate that next year for lost revenue. If it's the same, which we think it is, then it would be half and half. But it could be the percentages shift between the Arpa Fund and the Lost Revenue Fund, if that makes sense, depending on that formula that they released to us. So we're only showing the half. I just didn't want it to get out there that, wow, there's only 3.9 million left, and we started with 21.3. I would hate that to be the message. So
the other interesting thing that we saw during the infrastructure communication was that they might put a cap on lost revenue. I don't know if that made it through the final, but we're looking and reading anything that shows up there, you know, that would affect us on, you know, a ripple effect from that. So part of their funding, their thought process funding was to recollect the things that weren't spent in all the other ARPA funding and then to go into the infrastructure. So I don't know if that was a way that they're going to try to limit it or not. But I don't, like I said, we're looking to see if that made it through the final vote or not. So I haven't seen that yet.
All right, let's move to individual requests. We're going to have to do each one of these as a specific request. So we start with
Great.
Start.
All right. This is the first one, 3D Wildlife Rescue and Rehab. They are non-for-profit. They are underneath that our 10,000 cap fund. Their economic impact, it was at or less than our $10,000 cap. So the eligible funding at this point would be $1,401.
Ms. Weber.
Sorry for some questions, but based on what? Based on the 1,500 is based, or 1,400 based on their loss from?
What we're looking at is the 2019 to 2020.
That's, and what the loss was between those two incomes? Yeah,
for financial impact. So with ARPA, direct ARPA, financial impact or a specific item on our on the list that we have to go by are the eligible requirements. So at this point, this would be financial, you know, economic impact, and that's what they're eligible for, that dollar amount.
And that's why that's why Lost Revenue Fund is marked no. It's not relative. It's the ARPA fund.
Yeah, the lost revenue is really for local and the county calculation.
I got you.
Yeah, so I suppose the board, if they wanted to, could decide to do that, but right now, as far as looking at direct ARPA, and what we have to assess that with the federal guidelines that we're given, and how to assess it, that's our assessment at this point.
Well, thank you. That's what I appreciate about you and your committee is that you have restricted lines and you follow them. That's very good.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And so what we're saying is that in their application, they talk about not holding their fundraisers under federal guidelines, that the revenue they lost because they didn't hold a fundraiser doesn't apply.
Well, yeah, you can get into an ability for like a non-for-profit to, obviously they were limited to be able to have fundraisers, but at the same time, their total economic impact also has to come into, if they also cut back, which we have seen, and we're frugal, unfortunately, they might have ended up at break even or even at a positive because they were able to and did cut back on things. So our task is economic impact, with what we're able to see. So it's not really we're not trying to judge them in any way and whether they, how they ran and what they did, but we're just tasked with, when we're questioned by the Treasury, how, to make sure that we follow what we're tasked to do.
Like that.
Is there a motion to approve the application?
Parker.
Polk. Ms. Parker, seconded by Dr. Polk. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, a voice vote would be appropriate on this, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're spending money.
Yeah.
We're spending money. We should do roll call for each.
Yeah, we should do a roll call then.
Yeah.
Spending money, Steve.
Yeah. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next.
All right, the next one is business Better Cut Lawn Care. In Bradley, the upper code would be 2.9. The request was for 10,000. Through the analysis, they were within the 10,000 cap fund. Had a financial impact at or greater than 10,000, and the 50% reduction within the municipality. So their eligible funding would be $5,000.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make it. Yeah.
Mr. Wheeler, is there a second?
Donald?
Donald? Any discussion?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I just want everybody to know that this isn't Steve just making this decision arbitrarily on his own. We look at the tax forms, we meet before this meeting, we go through the criteria, and it's compared and vetted versus the rules and what they're asking for and what their bottom line impact was. So I didn't want the impression that Steve's up here making this decision on his own. He's vetting it and telling us that, yes, it meets the requirements. Because, if you say it in one meeting, sometimes somebody watches the meeting and didn't watch the previous one. So this is a board decision. He's just letting you know these are eligible for these amounts. Make sense?
Yeah.
If anyone wants to see those tax forms, they can go down and take a look at that.
Ms. Weber?
I was just contrastingly, then this person's impact was worth 5,000, 10,000, and valued at 5,000.
Correct.
Because it's in a city, not countywide. That's how it come. It's only 5, and it had to do with income, basing two income statements or 2 income reports.
Tax forms.
Tax forms. I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you. That's very clear. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. If there's no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Next.
All right, next, the Kankakee County Coroner request, that would be under Arpa Code 1.12. The request is per the attached letter would be for body bags. The requested amount was for $11,000, and we researched this as far as the various codes. The 1.12 is other public health services, as the letter mentions that they purchased under the Cures grant a year ago, and we believe that, you know, under the other public health services as the we believe it'll fall underneath there. We have all of this information is yet to be completely vetted through the Department of Treasury, so some of this might get changed, but we believe it'll go through. So we're doing our best to assess everything that we can get our hands on, so that it doesn't, you know, bounce back. But this, unfortunately, is also a side of our pandemic, and we believe that'll be part of it. So,
Mr.
Chairman,
Hunter,
motion approved.
is there a second? Parker for the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Next.
next one would be Camp Shawanasi, the Mantino address, 2.10. So that would be non-for-profit. I did a $10,000 request. They're within the 10,000 cap fund. The financial impact was at or greater than 10,000, and as a non-profit organization that the board just adjusted, their eligible funding would be 10,000.
Is there a motion? Mr. Long, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Dunnell.
Dunnell for a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Next.
All right, next one, D&D Distributors, doing business as Off the Wall. This would be 2.9, so small business economic assistance. Looking at, there was a $10,000 request. They're within the 10,000 cap fund. They had financial impact at or greater than 10,000, and then the 50% reduction within the municipality. So the eligible funding is 5,000.
Is there a motion?
Polk.
A motion approved by Dr. Pokes. Is there a second?
Dunnell.
Dunnell for a second. Any discussion? Mr. Wheeler.
Is 2129 Highland Road in the village of St. Anne? That's rural.
Well, I went Off the Wall is actually in the mall. So that's where I was going by the business.
Oh, where the business location
Where the
is,
business
not where the
location is.
filer was at.
Uh,
I think that makes sense. Would the
I don't
committee agree?
know. This is probably one that hit. I'm glad you caught that. I was actually one of them that I went by the business being in the mall in Bradley.
That's what they have on their tax form? Is, I would wonder. That becomes,
I thought it was Highland. It was on the tax form. S corp.
so how do we,
Highland's in my district.
The address is actually the Highland Road on the text one.
this part,
Yes, Highland is in the Roma Township district, out here by the country club. But if he has a business at the mall, that was my question I was going to ask. Was the business rural, or was it actually another address that he does business from?
I think if we're looking at precedent, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. We're looking at precedent. We had somebody else in a similar situation. Their business was in a municipality and their filing address was outside of the municipality. And we said the business was in municipality.
So,
It was in Hopkins Park. So there is precedent there. I was thinking back, this didn't sound unfamiliar, you know, so.
Commissioner Hess?
No, I would,
I'm sorry. All right, so, Ms. Weber?
I just wondered what they distribute. If they're distributors, what do they distribute?
Is that the hats and the sweatshirts and stuff? I'm sorry to say, I don't spend much time in the mall.
Yeah, I don't
Sorry, I didn't actually go look at that part of it, but I don't, off the top of my head, know that answer.
So we've got a motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. I'm going to call for a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
5,000, yes.
Ms. Polk,
aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Next.
Next is Dunlap Vision, is located within the Village of Bourbon A, 2.9 Small Business Economic Activity, request 10,000. They're within the 10,000 cap fund. The financial impact was at or greater than 10,000, and so 50% reduction within the municipality. So the eligible funding would be $5,000.
Is there a motion?
Donald.
Donald? Is there a second? Mr. Hunter, seconds. Any discussion? No discussion, roll, or Ms. Weber?
Again, I'm sorry for so many questions, but the reason for this is not, it's based on the tax forms again?
Yes.
Okay, and when you found the difference of a little
Yes.
more than 5,000, so 5,000 is relevant, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker. I'm sorry, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Next.
Next one is for Harbor House. This is under 1.12 other public health services. And the funding request is for a domestic violence program. And I believe I included their explanation for that. And so they are working with state's attorney and other.
Motion to approve, second by Mr. Long. Mr. Hunter makes the motion to approve. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker, Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Next.
Next, McElroy Communications, Mantino, small business economic assistance. They showed a loss at or greater than 10,000, so the 50% reduction, they're eligible funding at 5,000.
Is there a motion?
Donald.
Donald's motion to approve. Is there a second? Ms. Weber? Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Next.
All right, Sunrise Center, Inc., they're a non-for-profit, and their bottom line impact was at or below the $10,000 cap. They did request $20,000, that their eligible funding is $2,624.
Is there a motion?
Parker?
Ms. Weber, second by Ms. Parker. Discussion? Ms. Weber.
So the explanation about renovating is not intricate to the decision,
No,
is it?
there's, as far as the code of eligible ARPA, renovation is not. So the economic impact, it was the only thing.
That's tax forms again.
Yes.
Okay, you're very clear on what you're saying. Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess? Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Long? Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Okay, next. And we get a shift here too, so let's be careful. Understand where we're shifting.
Do you want me to take these, or do you want to?
Sure, I could fill in the gaps.
Okay. All right. The next group, although great organizations, no reflection on their organization. Again, we're tasked with economic impact or a specific direct ARPA thing. So we have to go, by what they're requesting and then by all the criteria. So we have some that unfortunately did not meet the requirements and are unfortunately not approved or recommended, although we might have some suggestions, if you will, going forward. The first one was Pembroke Township Road District. There was three different requests put in. I just combined them into one. They were pieces of equipment, new equipment, backhoe, lawn mowing equipment, and also a salt shed. Unfortunately, those do not meet federal ARPA requirements on direct ARPA. The note that I put on was financial impact could be reviewed if another application is submitted. So we have assisted other in the 7.3 category, which is transfers to other units of government. We have assisted them underneath the economic impact. So if there's that we could, with another application and financials, potentially look at a different way to help. But in this case, this request and for equipment is not ARPA, does not meet the ARPA requirements.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it was important to bring, some forward that didn't quite meet the requirements so the committee could start to understand the process and what has to be looked at. As to Steve's comment, there is no judgment on the applications or the applicant or anything, the request. It's just what stands the Department of Treasury's test and the law and the intent of the law, which is to help mitigate COVID, effects. So to Steve's point, if the Township Road District had a severe dip in MFT, which is directly tied to the ability to pay for this type of equipment and things, they could bring that forward. It's not the overall township, it would be the road district's financial impact because it's a separate unit. And so we would be happy to look at that, but we just don't have that information now. So that's why and I've made a lot of phone calls to people that may have gotten less amounts in the previous things that we've approved, so they know what's coming. One of them's, had a rent issue, and I mentioned, well, you could put in another application for rent, because you didn't get rental income that somebody wasn't able to pay. Typically, that's the federal government is doing that now. I just want to let the committee know that this is part of the process and showing that not everything is immediately approved. There are guidelines that we have to go through, and then why, and then what we're trying to do to help them out with the request or the denial, as the case may be.
Mr. Payton.
I guess my question is, what suggestions can I make to them? You said if they resubmit, that it might be a possibility.
Yeah, the last 2 years, 2019 and 2020 financials or audits, or in the government's case, it'd probably be the audit to look at. We could look at economic impact between 2019 and 2020 and see if they had some, to what level, because our government, the transfer to government is a $20,000 cap fund for that, per the county board. So we could look at that with financials for economic impact.
Okay.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Wheeler, you articulated you make phone calls, and Steve, I assume you have written communications to those individuals, units that have requested ARPA funds. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah,
okay.
Edmonds communicated.
Let me ask you this. With respect, Chairman Wheeler, did you happen to talk to the road commissioner at all and articulate with specificity, like, the dip in the MFT funds as an example?
Not on this one, no, we haven't, because we had to have the board act. But then we'll send the letter saying it wasn't approved, but we want to give you an opportunity to resubmit if you give us your financials.
Okay, and
the other thing is to keep in mind that this request was well over $200,000, and by law, we can't give anything over $49,999 because of the GATA situation.
Right.
But we also have a $20,000 cap for governmental transfers. You see my point? So we had to go through this process before I can reach out.
Right.
In this case.
Okay. So with respect to technical assistance, you guys would be available to provide illustrative examples of what you've articulated this morning, and I'm sure that Mr. Payton will share the same information to the road commissioner. Thank you.
Yeah, we've helped. We've communicated and helped a lot of, to specific information that we need to finish this. So we would be happy to do that. But just need the audit trail. Just has the application and all the information has to line up. Specifically. So that's why we're recommending, to start a different process, and we can go through that and potentially help in that way.
Because this has been presented to the committee, I assume we need to take action indicating we support the recommendation. All right, the recommendation is non-approval. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation? If that's not too confusing. Or would it be easier just to have a motion to? All right. Is there a motion to not approve the application?
Well,
it does not meet the requirements, so unless we want to change our requirements, why we need to reject the application.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you very much. We've articulated the reasons, and I'll make the motion that we concur with the recommendation of the administration based on.
You're going to have to be closer to the mic, Mr. Hunter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would move to deny the request based on the applicant not conforming and meeting the requirements for the ARPA funds.
Second.
All right. There's a motion and a second to not accept this application. Is there further discussion?
No, we accepted the application, but we denied the request for the fund.
Deny the request.
Yeah.
Motion is to deny the request. I'm sorry. Accept the application, deny the request. Thank you. With the background noise, I had a little trouble hearing all you said. All right, that's the second. Accept the application but deny the request. Any other? And then a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Aye. Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Featherly?
Aye.
Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Long? Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
All right.
Next.
The next one is Wright and Kankakee. They're not-for-profit. Their request was for $37,500, identified for new air conditioning units. Air conditioning units do not meet federal ARPA requirements. They did provide us with their financial information, and there was no economic impact. So unfortunately, we will not be able to. This is also unapproved because it just nothing meets the federal ARPA requirements.
Same motion, Mr. Chairman.
Same motion by Mr. Hunter,
Second. Mr.
second by
Featherling.
Mr. Fairfield. And Ms. Weber?
Then, did not we have a motion to approve air quality in our buildings here? That were approved?
If I can answer that completely. We have lost revenue allocations that we can allocate from our fund towards county departments,
Gotcha.
okay? And air conditioning is not air quality. Air conditioning is if it was the UV machinery to kill the contagion or filtration, that's a different situation. We could entertain that under the caps that we have. But they still didn't have an economic impact. So it still wouldn't meet the eligibility requirements because the pandemic, this whole money is to help economic impact, and they didn't have any. So it was just, and through no fault of their own, people are coming to us and asking for money for air conditioning units. We're seeing it a lot. Well, that's not a COVID reason when it either broke down or existed before or after that. We're not the upgrade company. We're the people that are helping people mitigate COVID. And it's a great organization, but it just doesn't meet the requirements.
So the counties was underneath lost revenue. It was a
Correct.
distribution of lost revenue, not.
Out of ARPA money, and this is what that's what this would come from.
If I may do a procedural point, do we still have sound in the back? Are you okay? All right. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, that makes.
Any other questions? A motion to accept the application but refuse the request at this point is on the floor. If there is no other question or comments, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess? Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Long? Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
And next.
Next one, Wesley United Methodist Church of Bradley. This would be under the non-for-profit code. The request was for $50,500. This was for 2 heat AC units, air conditioning units. This also, the AC units, the heat units do not meet the federal ARPA requirements. And this one also falls underneath church and the Supreme Court ruling, where there's a division as far as the eligible funding for federal grant money. So if they're doing something for a food bank, food pantry, that's one thing, but for congregation and like that, the federal money cannot be used for that. So we also have to be careful in what the churches, when they request what that is. So, but the air conditioning unit also does not meet the federal ARPA requirements. So.
Is there a motion? Mr. Fairfield, motion to accept the application and refuse the request. Ms. Weber seconding that?
Polk.
Dr. Polk seconds, okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Mr. Wheeler.
Just to let folks know, there are more of these that we're working with, but I'm reaching out because some of them, as Steve said, they have a food pantry program, so they have a freezer that's broken down. So that's more of a social service type request, and we can do that because it's for a program. The Supreme Court ruling is you can't give money to further preaching and proselytizing, I think is the word they say. So it's a very tough situation that we're in with the churches because we want to help, but you've got to draw a line. If you did have air conditioning or it's broken down, that doesn't mean that you're eligible for COVID funding. But if you have air conditioning and you want to put HEPA filters on it, then you could come to us and see if we can fund something like that or reimburse. The board may say, yes, we'll reimburse that. That's a decision we'll make. But just know I'm starting to get the churches that are applying, and it's a very fine line we have to walk legally.
Mr. Fairfield?
Can they apply for reimbursement for like masks and hand sanitizing and that type of stuff?
I believe it was before March of this year. No. But after?
That's a good question. It's still who it's for, I think we got to be careful with.
Okay.
I think it ultimately we're gonna have to be very careful with the church and who and what it's for. We'll have to try to weed through that one with the Treasury. And by the way, we do ask the Treasury, but we don't get very good responses from them at this point. So we're doing our best, to make the best decision, that we can with this.
Mr. Payton?
I would like to request from the Finance Department, when we reject an application, that is it asking too much to send out a formal letter to that organization explaining your application was rejected for XYZ?
Yeah, we do. Those letters are drafted, and when we go through this process after the full board votes, then the letter goes out.
Then the letters go out.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, those are all ready to go. Approvals and rejections, or even suggestions on how to reword things. We weren't able to approve this. If you reapply XYZ, we customize them. But most of the time, we're trying to handle it before it gets here. I met with a couple nonprofits yesterday to let them know about some certificates of good standing and some things we need to be able to move forward on their request. So we're trying to hedge it off before it even gets here. But sometimes it's good for us to see these, I think, as a committee, to know the process we're going through to bring everything to you vetted. So,
Mr. Fairfield?
Well, some churches I know they use them for election sites. Would they be eligible for that?
Yes, election.
If they do that.
Yeah.
I think Dan has already done that.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a question. Thank you.
If the if it does turn into an application, if you folks are talking to anybody, if they identify that and separate that on the application, so that way it's clear, in our backup information, is very important. So it's.
All right, Ms. Weber?
I just wanted to say what good news it would be, though, for churches if they did have a food program, that there is a way to support that, even that wouldn't be connected to the federal ruling.
Yes, we can.
I think that's just a good sign.
There's ways to help in that avenue, yeah, for sure.
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I remember some time ago, Chairman Wheeler articulated that this matter, funding issue, eligibility would come up, and the separation in terms of the ministerial stuff as opposed to program. So it has come up, and he anticipated this issue coming up, and I appreciate the explanation in terms of how to deal with it in terms of a dichotomy in terms of the religious side versus services.
If there's no further comments, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker? Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Next.
Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society is a non-for-profit request identifying the lack of not being able to do fundraisers in 2020. The request was for $4,600. They did have a decrease in revenue of over 30,000 in 2020. However, they also cut expenses by more than the lost revenue, and the result was no economic impact, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, we don't have, with the way the request came in and the backup, that we're not able to fund that, unfortunately.
Is there a motion?
Parker?
Parker, motion, accept the request, refuse, accept the application, refuse the request, right?
Exactly.
Second by Mr. Fairfield. Any discussion?
Just
Wheeler.
brought forward, you know, just normally I would have called them and said, hey, look, you know, this isn't, you know, pass muster, but I wanted the committee to see that this was an example of really somebody doing the right thing during the pandemic of reducing their expenses, and it cost them on this end because their net position did not deteriorate. It actually improved because expenses were cut more than the loss, if you were to look at it like that. So I think that's probably the best way to explain it, Steve. We go to that detail. The tax forms tell us all, or the audits. So thank you.
We have a motion. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess? Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Is there anything else for the Finance Department? Seeing nothing, thank you.
All right,
That's
happy Thanksgiving.
a lot of work. You've been really busy. We move to the Treasurer's Office. Mr. Africano, you have the Treasurer's report and the Collector's report. The monthly resolutions were not received, so a motion to combine and approve the Treasurer's report and the Collector's report would be in order. Mr. Miller, is there a second? Dunno? All in favor of accepting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. What do you have for us? Good morning.
Good morning. First, I want to discuss a housekeeping issue. The state passed a law this summer, SB 558, which is a PTEL loss and collection report. And like many laws, the implementation was less than stellar, and it was due on the 15th of November. And I just want to comment on the record so everybody is aware. Our software vendor, DevNet, wasn't even able to process the request until the 17th through our software. That report was delayed until the 19th. From my office to the clerk's office, Dan Hendrickson's office, and I just want to put that on the record so that PTEL loss and collection report has been done and was late as a result of, it was late all across the state actually, because of the rules that they promulgated were less than precise. So I want to put that on the record first. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that report, who would be the impacted parties? Who would complain? I guess I'm trying to figure out.
I'm not sure anybody will.
Okay.
It's a report that Dan will use during tax extension, which I believe that process won't begin until after the first of the year.
Okay.
Well, I'm just concerned that. I'm not concerned. I just want it on the record that it's not a reflection on Dan not getting it done, and unfortunately, I don't think it's a reflection on. I mean, not unfortunately. Fortunately, I don't think it's a reflection on my office either. It's a problem that happened all across the state.
Okay.
As you know, DevNet handles probably 4/5 of all counties in the state, so. They had a software update on Monday, but the report wasn't even available until Wednesday, which was 2 days after the deadline.
Thank you.
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nick, are there any statutory penalties that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but we're working through that right now. It doesn't appear that, but the statute was clear, use the word shall. So it needed to be done by the 15th, but I guess we're in good company with a lot of people who didn't get it done. There's still parties out there that don't have it done, but I want that on the record.
Okay, is there anything else you have?
Yeah, I do. I have some good news. So we sold less properties this year, which on its face seemed like not a good thing. We brought less to tax sale, and we generated less revenue. But the upside to that is we collected more money, and more properties are current than they were a year ago. So that's a real positive sign, because we want people in their house. We really want as the least amount of properties as possible to go to tax sale. So for many reasons, our tax collection this year, and I think I've said it before up here, is up this year, percentage-wise and dollar-wise. So that was the reason we sent less and the reason we sold less. So that's a good thing. Lastly, on a personal note, I just wanted to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and to the people of the county.
Thank you. Any questions for the treasurer? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything you're doing. And we'll move to the sheriff's department. We have a monthly update from the sheriff. You can examine. Good morning.
Good morning. So everybody should have a copy of the report that we presented to the Criminal Justice Committee. One thing that obviously is troubling, that I'm sure we hear about almost every day, at last count in the county, we have had 18 homicides in 2021. Compare that to 2020, where we had 9. So they virtually doubled over the course of the 2021. And some background information, if you will. At present, we have 34 individuals in custody of our local inmates out of the 250 who are charged with murder. So 34. It's 13.5% of our population are in for first-degree murder. Unfortunately, the cost of housing these individuals have an impact, because they don't plead guilty and go to prison. They normally go to trial. So they stay in custody significantly longer. In our longest current individual who was charged with murder has been in for 4.38 years, or 1,600 days, awaiting trial. The last number that we have calculated for the cost of housing somebody per day is $102 a day. When you multiply that out, it's $163,200, or $40,800 a year in cost. So that's significant. Our revenue from out of county inmates and detainees is down, as I've reported almost every month. And at this point, as of this morning, I have no status from federal court in relationship to the pending litigation with McHenry County and ICE.
Any questions for the sheriff? Do you have other items?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I mean, other than these 2 requests, any more you needed?
No, unless there's any other questions on the report.
Then let's move to the 2 ARPA requests. You want to speak to the first one?
Yeah, so the first one I believe is Graykey.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah, so so what a Graykey mobile phone forensic system is basically a system that allows us to get into cell phones to help our investigators as they are looking at their involvement in a potential any potential criminal activity. The system we have now, which is called Celebrate, has served its purpose over the years. However, within the last 3 years or so, the technology has not, the technology of Celebrate has not kept up with the technology of cell phones. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not a cell phone guy as far as having to have the latest and greatest. However, some people do, most people do. And so if you have anything later than a 6S Apple phone, the Celebrate system will only allow us to get photos and videos off of that phone. They don't allow us to get texts or emails or anything like that. So it doesn't really benefit us. I mean, yeah, sure, photos, some photos could help, but I mean, most people aren't taking photos of something they were just involved in. So emails and texts work a lot better. And if you have a 6S, if you have anything past a 6S Apple iPhone or Apple phone, there's not much information we can get off that. So the cost is $9,995 per year. And I know that this committee and the general policy, if you will, has kind of been, what do we do after the 3 years? And that's a valid concern, obviously. And so the $9,995 per year, at the end of that 3 years, the 4 other larger departments, police departments, including Manteno, Kankakee City, Bradley, and Bourbonnais, have all agreed to share that cost once the 3 years expires. So there is kind of a plan moving forward past the 3-year commitment of the ARPA money. So I can try and answer any other questions on if you have any, but that's the reason that we would like to have Gray Key.
Is there a motion on this? Ms. Weber? Motion to approve? Mr. Fairfield seconds. Any discussion? Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We could, with ARPA, you could prepay some of these contracts at the end of the ARPA time. So in 24, we could prepay through 26 or 28. Just kind of keep that in mind when you're, especially with the city,
sure,
the other municipalities who got this money.
Sure.
We could prepay out however many years you think the technology would keep up with the phones. Does that make sense?
Well,
because you don't want to pay it and then all of a sudden they don't keep up with technology.
It does, and that was just going to be my point, is just like Celebrate. Now, I will say that in doing some research on Gray Key, they have right now, apparently, where are we at in Apple? Is it 13? Is that what the most recent number is? I don't even know. But apparently, there's a 15 coming out. And Gray Key has already started their work to support the 13, so, or the 15 rather. So they are at least moving in the right direction. So it's a very distinct possibility that that will happen. There's just no guarantee. Right. And the other thing is, costs could possibly go down. I know that's kind of a pipe dream, but.
Ms. Weber?
That confirms my question, thank you, was to do the upgrade their system too, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a motion on the floor, a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Long? Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
And we have a second
Thank you.
request. Go ahead.
I do, and this one I believe has already, and I don't know how we move forward with this or if it's just sort of an explanation, but the dual view transmission X-ray full body scanner is something that we would like for the jail. I think the initial approval, if you will, was the estimate that we had was from, I hate to use the term back in the day, but a while ago, and it was slightly over $600,000. And unbeknownst to me, some of those prices have come down significantly. And the price quote that we got from this company is, I believe it's 166, I believe. And what that does is, so it's got a couple different functions on it, and there's a number of scanners out there, just regular scanners that obviously this committee would want me to go bid to find the lowest, most qualified. However, this company, which is a company called Romine, has a machine that is a sole source, I don't know what the term is, it's a sole source product. In other words, there's nothing to compare it to. And so what this does is it has the scanner part on it that everybody goes in and the full body scan. And it also has an additional scanner where it scans your torso area, because a lot of times that's where things are hidden. Some advantages for this, and especially, when we're talking about COVID and contact, we truly believe that this will significantly reduce our contraband, any contraband that gets in the jail. It'll significantly reduce the number of strip searches. And it will also, I think in the long run, will help with our insurance rates, only because there'll be a lot less hands-on, because some people don't want to have people put their hands on them when they're getting patted down and things like that. So there is no hands-on. There will be no hands-on with this. We will still obviously do some cursory pat-downs, but when you get into the hardcore of looking at different areas of the body, you're going to eliminate a lot of that. And once the word spreads, and like anything else, the good and the bad of what happens in the jail spreads to everybody who kind of frequents our place. And I think once word gets out, I think there'll be a lot less possibility of somebody trying to bring contraband into our facility.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Downey, have you seen the technology
Yes.
at work?
Yes.
Where at?
At the Sheriff's Conference back in September.
Invasive searches.
Yeah, well, anything invasive,
Tactile.
Yes. I mean, we'll still, like I say, when somebody comes in, we'll still, because we want to be safe from, when somebody walks in our door, our officers will still be patting an individual down because we still don't know what they have and if we find something. However, to get, and it's not invasive, but there's areas where some people hide things that we don't find every once in a while. And this will help with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Parker.
It's Ms. Parker. Sheriff, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, could you tell me if that is going to show if the person walking through the machine has any implants, such as, a fake hip or any kind of bolts or screws that may have been surgically implanted? Will it go that far to show that?
You know what? I don't know. But before the county board meeting, if this gets approved, I will have an answer for you.
Okay,
I'm guessing it will, because it does. It'll show. Yeah. Well.
So, I don't know. Like airports, sometimes you get pulled aside because you have.
Right. Well,
so,
and there's obviously training that goes along with this, and there'll be people who will be trained and our medical staff will be trained on it as well. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, I believe that you'll be able to see some things that are done surgically, knee or hip.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sheriff.
You're welcome.
Mr. Fairfield?
Sheriff, what kind of a warranty does this have, and is there a possibility of getting an extended warranty? Have you ever thought about that, or I assume you probably have, but I thought I'd ask.
I do know that their service is 24/7. If there is a problem with it, they will be here as soon as they can get here. They come out of a small town in Kentucky, I believe. And so they're just starting to get into Indiana and Illinois. There's 2 other counties in Illinois that have this machine right now.
Could you check, see if they have like an extended warranty you could buy?
Yes.
For the simple reason, those x-ray machines in the courthouse and places like that, they're very expensive. You can get an extended warranty, it might save us some money down the line.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. Witter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Plus you don't want to keep getting the phone calls about not having an extended warranty.
It's just for cars.
We did approve it. We put it on what was called at the time the future projects list that we were going to rank. And so those were other building projects, other things that we said, yes, we want to do it. Then we were going to rank those and then prioritize them. So that's why I put on there, it's already approved.
Yeah.
We'll put the number on it, and maybe if there's more than one item, I mean, we could just say, you know, with this vote, move it to the approved for the next county board meeting if you want to. If you want to have it prioritized with other stuff, it's really the will of the committee. But no, you've already approved it.
Yeah.
We could pluck it off there and put it with the next round that goes to the county board in a couple weeks. It's really how you want to do things here. But if you wanted to wait and see the other things, we could do that as well. So timeline delivery is at 6-8 weeks probably. I mean, are we waiting on the slow boat?
I think it'd be fairly quickly.
It'd be fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think it's fairly quick.
Where are we on the legality of bidding requirements?
That was going to be the other thing I said, is we have to get the state's attorney to weigh in. Did you get anything from them on bidding it?
Not from the state's attorney, but I do have a sole source letter.
Okay.
That I will provide for the state's attorney and make sure.
Yeah, let's just run it through them. And if we've got to put that out there to bid, then we'll do it, you know.
Is there a motion to put this before the full county board? Ms. Weber, Mr. Long? All right, any discussion? If not, we have a motion on the floor. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
When you get it, I'd like to check it out.
You can, absolutely.
Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Ms. Weber?
I was wondering if both of his proposals were going to be to the county board, or did we just vote for the one? Both of them.
Any other?
Yeah, I have one more. I think I don't know if I told this committee or criminal justice, we did have another inspection for ICE from the ODO, which stands for the Office of Detention Oversight. They found 2 issues. One was the order to detain did not have an appropriate signature on it from ICE. So it really wasn't our issue, it's an ICE issue. But that's okay. I mean, that's, you know, easy to rectify. The second issue was there were a couple files that they found that lacked the proper forwarding address for property, and that was certainly on us. But minor in the big picture, if you will. You know, to make sure that when people leave or when they get deported, that we are able to get their property. If we don't have it already, we're able to get the property somewhere where it needs to go. So a very good inspection, which our inspections the last 3 or 4 years have been awesome compared to the first one. But the inspectors had high praise for Sergeant Amanda Appel and Corporal Joe Hernandez, who are our ICE liaison and in charge of transports. Sergeant Justin Lesage, who handles all the classification. Sergeant Kelly Love, who's our food service supervisor. And Correctional Officer Chris Larson, who is the safety officer. And a credit to them for the work they do for this program. They also were very, very, very impressed with Chief Kalawenzu, Assistant Chief Schultz, and Assistant Chief Woods in the operation of what they do with ICE. And I know that people will question this, but they had no findings in our medical department, which means they found nothing wrong with what they were doing and how they were treating the individuals. So, and again, as I've always said, what we do for ICE reflects our entire population. So, because we do the same thing for everybody. So it's a benefit even to our local population that these individuals are getting, as I've often said, better medical treatment than we do. And the inspectors even commented on Senate Bill 667, which passed, that says after December 31st, we can't house for ICE. They don't understand what the thinking was with our legislature. That's not me criticizing them, that's our inspectors criticizing them. And they realize that these detainees are gonna go elsewhere, away from family, further from family, and so that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's nothing more for the sheriff, we'll move on.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, Sheriff.
I apologize. Have you seen anything about the squad introducing a bill to eliminate arrests from marshals? I didn't know if you had said, I just saw it last night. Apparently they don't want to have federal prisoners either now. So
we knew that was coming.
Yeah, just want to mention that.
We don't want anybody in jail.
Nope.
Anything else? All right, if not, we move to other business. The circuit clerk fee ordinance. You have that on your tablet. Resolution amending the ordinance, establishing circuit fees and criminal and traffic assessments to be charged by the clerk of the circuit clerk to reflect the new and revised civil and criminal case categories.
I'm done. I just forgot my mask.
Who do we have to speak for this? Come on up.
Sandy and I have been working on this effective January 1 of 2022. The courts across the state are changing the designations of cases that are filed with the courthouse. So if you're looking at like a divorce case that's filed under a D number right now, it's going to change to a DC or a DN number depending on children or no children. So the ordinance that exists right now has to change to reflect the new case categories so that Sandy's office can then properly code them to create the new fee for filing. So that's what this ordinance does.
Is there a motion on that? Motion to approve by Ms. Weber. Is there a second?
Polk.
Dr. Polk. Any questions on it? Ms. Weber.
Thank you. It doesn't change the fees, it's changing the categories?
At this point, yes, there's not been any fees that we have been told or that Sandy is aware of that's changing. If that is, she will let me know.
Bring it back.
All right. Any other questions? This can be a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. A resolution appropriating funds for the payment of the county engineer's salary. Mr. Ritter, did you want to speak to this?
Well, I could. Is Mark here?
Yes.
I would like him to tee it up, but the one thing I want to find out is obviously he's going to be retiring.
Right.
Do we do this again when he retires, or is this committing for the next 5 years? This is the pay rate. That's my only question. I didn't get that answered because obviously if someone's coming in with not as much experience, we may not fund that position as high a level. Do you see my point?
Mr. Rogers, can you give us some information?
Yeah, am I on back here? The resolution that you have in front of you is just for the remaining part of my term. I'm planning to retire officially probably in March, depending on the transition of the person. So I do not know what that person is going to be paid because the board hasn't got a contract with that person. So this is just for my salary. And then when the next county engineer is appointed and that salary is established, we will have to do a supplemental to this and send it to Springfield or send it to Ottawa, and then request the 50% of the salary from the feds.
Thank you. Any other questions? Could we have a motion to approve? Mr. Hunter,
Polk.
a second by Dr. Polk. We're spending money. Is there any discussion? Ms. Weber?
Just to confirm that the dates that Mr. Rogers is saying is that January 1 to 3/27 is what he was saying on the form.
So,
That's correct.
we would change the resolution on your retirement and the hiring of a new engineer, you're saying?
Yes, I have to supplement, I have to send this to Springfield to Ottawa in December to get approved by Springfield. So that's why I'm bringing it to this committee now. It's got to go through the board on December 14th in order for my salary to be paid out of motor fuel tax. This is that instrument to make that happen. So that's the reason for the resolution coming now before our next person is appointed. And then once that person's appointed, we'll have to do this again at another meeting for the rest of the year.
Okay. Any other questions? We're spending money, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Raymond? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We have nothing from the auditor. This seems to be a pattern that has been established now for many months and is quite disappointing. Is there any old business come before the committee?
When was the last time the auditor came to a finance meeting and then maybe even a county board meeting to present?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. It's been that long.
March of 2020.
March of 2020.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Feather?
Chair, does he continue to be paid if he's not doing his job?
He is.
And then we just got billed for legal fees, and so he gets paid and we're paying legal fees on him?
I don't have enough information to answer that question. Any other new or old business? Hearing none. Mr. Hess? Is there a second?
Polk.
Dr. Polk, seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.